I came home on a cold December afternoon, the Nebraska wind biting my face as if to remind me the world was no longer as peaceful as the memories I had clung to for the past 9 months. The flight from the military base in the Middle East to the U.S. was long and draining, but the shock waiting for me at home hit harder than any mission I'd ever faced. 3 days after landing in Lincoln, I stood inside my parents' old library, the stronghold of my childhood memories, and found a folder neatly tucked away in a drawer my mother rarely touched. It was the family trust document. But the name listed at the top was no longer my mother's. I read every line again, eyes locked on the cold, legal wording. The primary trustee was now Amanda, my wife. And my mother, Lorraine, who had lived on this land for over 30 years, had been pushed down to secondary beneficiary. Every clause had been signed, notarized, and dated during the 4th month of my deployment to Al Dafra, while I was coordinating communications at a forward base halfway across the globe. I took a long breath, fingers tightening around the folder like I was afraid it would vanish. This land, this old wooden house, had been built by my father, once an aerospace engineer, and the most principled man I've ever known. He used to say, "Land isn't just property, it's our roots." Before he died of a stroke, he placed everything into a solid trust. I once believed no one could touch that legacy, and I was wrong. "What are you looking for?" came a familiar voice from the doorway. Amanda stood there, brown hair tied back, wearing a shearling coat and the earrings I'd given her on our 5th anniversary. Her smile was gentle, but her eyes scanned me carefully. I closed the folder and slid it into a binder. "Just looking through some old documents. I organized everything while you were gone. Your mom's not as sharp as she used to be. I had to handle it all myself." I nodded, saying nothing, my throat clenched. "I paid the property taxes, utilities, even the medical bills last month. Trust me, that trust needed to be updated." Your mom fully agreed. I didn't respond. My mom sat in the living room, eyes locked on the TV, blasting daytime shows too loudly. She was 80, and her memory had started slipping. The last time I called from the UAE, she asked if I'd be home for Thanksgiving 2019. 4 years after it had passed. That night, after Amanda went to bed, I sat alone on the back porch. The bare, twisted trees stretched into the black sky like ghosts. I remembered what my father told me the night before he passed. "When you're away, pick your housekeeper wisely." The next morning, I kissed Amanda goodbye as she headed to work at a finance firm called Helix Advisors. She thought I'd be staying home to rest. She didn't see me slip the trust papers into my coat pocket. I turned onto a quiet street downtown, mind racing. How could a trust meant to protect my mother be changed while I wasn't even in the country? And why had Amanda never mentioned a word, not even once, in all those teary video calls? "I'm Charles, 36, 15 years in uniform, and now..." I was about to enter a different kind of war, inside my own home. I parked in front of my family's old cabin just before noon. The scent of damp ferns mixed with rotting wood filled the air, as if the place had been trying to whisper a secret for years. I stepped into my father's office, the one room that was always off-limits when I was young. The oak desk, hand-built bookshelves, and an old photo of him standing in a snowy field still sat untouched. I pulled out the folder from my coat and quietly flipped through the pages. The name that hit me first: Amanda Rayner Hull, trustee. My mother, Lorraine Hull, now listed as secondary beneficiary. Legally, this meant she no longer had control over the land. Amanda could sell, lease, or transfer it without asking anyone. But what chilled me wasn't just the names. It was the final clause in the amendment. Assets may be reallocated into flexible investment portfolios at the discretion of the trustee to preserve long-term financial value. I didn't need to be a lawyer to understand that gave Amanda near-tenal control over my family's land and money. The last time my father spoke about the trust was 3 winters ago, when he'd just been diagnosed with late-stage heart disease. I remembered him sitting in this exact chair, holding a coffee mug, saying, "Charles, when I'm gone, everything here stays the same. Your mom runs it, you oversee it, no one else." Now, Amanda had cut my mother out of that role. How, and for what purpose? I checked the signatures. My mother signed, Amanda signed, the notary, Rachel L. Moon. a name I'd never heard before. That couldn't be a coincidence. I stepped into the living room, where my mother was dozing in her recliner. The news played on the TV, but she wasn't really watching. Her eyes were closed, hands gently holding the wedding photo of me and Amanda. I leaned down and softly nudged her. "Mom, do you remember signing any papers Amanda gave you?" She blinked slowly. "What papers?" "Things about the trust, the land." She furrowed her brow. Maybe?" "Amanda said it was for property taxes. She rushed me to sign. I don't really remember." Followed hard. "Was anyone else there when you signed?" She shook her head like trying to recall something long buried. "No, just Amanda. She said it had to be fast so the bank wouldn't freeze anything. Charles, did I do something wrong?" I gripped her hand. "No, Mom, you didn't do anything wrong." In my mind, the pieces were beginning to form a terrifying picture. Amanda waited until I was gone, until my mother was mentally at her weakest, to execute something I could no longer call a favor. It was strategic, intentional. I drove to a small notary office on the city's west side. The building had a red tin roof, faded signage. I asked about Rachel Moon. The receptionist checked the records and confirmed. "She notarized that file about 4 months ago, but what? Our system doesn't show a photo ID or signature image of your mom taken at the time of signing. Normally, we require that for elderly signers." I sank into the plastic chair beside the counter. "So it's possible? No one actually confirmed she signed it?" She hesitated. "I can't say for sure, but if you're uncertain, I'd suggest speaking to a family and estate attorney immediately." I stepped back into the cold, mind spinning. Amanda hadn't just altered the trust. She'd removed every safeguard, using loopholes only someone fluent in finance and law would exploit. At that point, I didn't know the whole truth yet, but I was certain of one thing. Amanda wasn't just targeting assets. She was targeting the entire future of my family. And I couldn't let that happen 1 second longer. That night, as I walked into the kitchen, Amanda was pouring red wine into 2 crystal glasses. She turned, smiling like everything was normal. "I thought we should have dinner together. You just got back and we haven't really had time to relax." I sat down, eyes fixed on the table. "You changed a lot while I was gone." "Didn't you always want someone to help with the family?" she said, placing the glass in front of me. "Your mom. She needed support, Charles. At first, I just helped her sort bills. Then I noticed she forgot due dates, missed her car insurance." I took a small sip. "And you thought the best solution was to make yourself the trustee?" She paused for a moment, then smiled, as if nothing was wrong. "Your mom agreed. I couldn't have done anything without her signature." I looked her straight in the eye. "But you never mentioned it to me. Not even once. You were in a combat zone, Charles. I didn't want to distract you. I thought when you came back, you'd be relieved everything was handled." I nodded, trying to stay calm. "Mom said you gave her a lot of papers to sign. Every time you told her it was just a bill or a confirmation. But she couldn't remember what any of it was." Amanda let out a soft laugh, but it rang hollow. "She's 80. Of course her memory isn't what it used to be. But I always explained everything. Maybe she just forgot." Her words were like sugar-coating poison. I wasn't sure what was more terrifying, Amanda's calmness or the possibility that my mother had been quietly led away from control of everything that once belonged to her. After dinner, Amanda went into the study with her laptop. I stood silently outside the door, listening to the steady rhythm of the keyboard. I imagined what she might be working on. Bank accounts, investment reports, maybe contracts I didn't even know existed. The next morning, I took my mom out to buy a few winter items. On the way back, I drove past a newly built senior living facility north of Lincoln. My mom looked out the window and frowned. "This place looks nice. Amanda brought me here a few weeks ago." I glanced at her. "She did?" Mom nodded. "Said we should take a look, just in case I needed to move in." I thought it was just a visit, but the next day, Amanda said she ordered a new mattress, called it a fast-track placement. It felt strange. I gripped the wheel tighter. "Did you sign anything, Mom?" She stayed quiet for a while, then sighed. I think I did. Amanda gave me a form I don't really remember. My worry hardened into something colder, like a verdict hanging over my head. Amanda was quietly pushing my mom out of her own home. That night, while Amanda went out to meet a so-called investment partner, I slipped into the study. Her laptop didn't have a password, just a 6-digit PIN. I tried our wedding date, and it opened instantly. The most recent email was a thread between her and a real estate firm in Omaha, with detailed plans of our family land attached. The project was laid out clearly: subdivide, build, phase-by-phase sale. A final note read, "Client requests discretion, must be finalized before next spring." I leaned back, chest tightening. This wasn't a theory anymore. Amanda was planning to sell every inch of land my father spent his life protecting. I printed the entire email chain, along with the trust amendment, and locked them in a personal safe in the shed behind the house. I changed the combination that night. My mom couldn't fight this, but I could. And from that moment on, I knew every move Amanda made, no matter how small, had to be monitored. I had no doubts anymore. She was planning to erase an entire legacy. I knew I needed an ally. The first person who came to mind was Kyle Bennett, an old unit buddy, now an attorney in Des Moines. He once helped another vet navigate a brutal estate battle, and he was one of the few people I trusted enough to tell everything. I called Kyle the next morning, right after printing everything from Amanda's computer. He picked up after 2 rings, voice still groggy. "Charles? Good to hear you made it back from the Middle East. What's going on? You sound off." "I don't think you have to be in combat to get betrayed," I said, eyes still fixed on the final page spilling out of the printer. "I need to meet. It's about the trust, the land, and my wife." We met at a small cafe near the city courthouse. Kyle brought a laptop and an empty legal pad. After I explained everything, he sat quietly for a long moment, then finally nodded. "You need to start with a financial trace. If she opened joint accounts with your mom or created any new funds, there'll be a trail. But more importantly, we need proof your mom didn't understand what she was signing. Without that, it's just your word against hers." "Can you get those records?" I asked. Kyle smirked. "Not personally, but I know someone who can." 3 days later, I was introduced to Jolene Carter, an independent financial investigator who used to work for major banks before going freelance. A woman in her early 40s with razor-sharp eyes and a mind like a database. "I'll need access to any account with your mom and Amanda's name on it," she said after scanning my documents. "And, if possible, samples of your mom's signature from before her memory declined." I handed her everything I had. Old bills, pages from mom's handwritten journals, even a scanned copy of a contract my dad had signed years ago, complete with her signature. Jolene started work that very day. 5 days later, she called me. Her voice was cold. "You need to come to my office. There are things you should see for yourself." I got there within 30 minutes. On her desk were 3 sets of bank statements. 2 from First Federal Bank in pale blue, 1 from Sterling Investments. "These are 2 joint accounts opened 6 months ago," she said, pointing to the first page. "Co-owners, Amanda Rayner Hole and Lorraine Hole. Both had withdrawal privileges, but nearly every transaction was done by Amanda." I leaned over, reading the charges. 1 for $9,500 to a Chase credit card, $12,000 to an architecture firm in Omaha, and dozens more for shopping, spas, restaurants. Places my mother would never go. "And this one," she handed me the 3rd file, "is an investment brokerage account. The original trust assets were transferred here, roughly $370,000. And in the last 6 months," she flipped to the next page, "a total of $74,300 has been withdrawn. 11 separate transactions ranging from $4,000 to $10,000, all labeled with vague descriptors. Capital reallocation, relocation expenses, legal services." I was speechless. Jolene continued, her voice low. "Every transaction includes your mother's signature as confirmation. But I compared it to her older signature samples, and there's something suspicious." She handed me a side-by-side printout on A4 paper, two signature lines, one from 5 years ago, the other from the most recent withdrawal form. This clearly shows signs of impaired motor control, or possibly cognitive confusion. The strokes are shaky, uneven, and 3 letters don't match the original form. If this were sent for forensic analysis, there's a high chance it would be rejected. I leaned back in my chair, head spinning. Amanda could do all of this and leave no trace? Jolene stared at me. No, Charles, she left plenty. She just assumed you'd never look. That night, I came home and found Amanda on a video call with someone. On the screen was a plot of empty land, bare, with only a zoning layout on paper. When she saw me walk in, she quickly closed the laptop. "You're home early?" I looked at her for a long moment, then replied quietly, "Yeah. I needed a little more time to understand what's really going on." She smiled but didn't ask anything else. And I knew, in my gut, this wasn't about helping Mom with the finances anymore. This was a structured plan, thought out in advance, and I started to realize I wasn't just an obstacle in Amanda's way. I was the last one she needed to remove. On Monday afternoon, I took Mom to the University of Nebraska Medical Center. The neurology clinic was on the 7th floor, its glass walls overlooking the pale gray city. The doctor assigned to us was Dr. Angela Moreau, a geriatric specialist with over 20 years of experience, known for her gentle but thorough approach. My mother sat quietly across from her, hands clasped. Even with her soft smile, I could see the tension in her eyes. I wasn't doing much better. Dr. Moreau started with simple questions. "Mrs. Lorraine, what day is it today?" My mom answered, "Friday," even though it was Monday. "Where are you right now?" "At the grocery store." She blinked several times, then, "What's your son's full name?" She paused, then chuckled nervously. "Charles? Henry? No, wait. What is it again?" I turned away, hiding the crack forming in my expression. After nearly 40 minutes of evaluation, Dr. Moreau closed her folder. She invited me into a private room to talk. The preliminary results show clear signs of early-stage dementia. My suspicion is mild Alzheimer's, likely progressing quietly for the past 12 to 18 months. I sank into the chair, my voice strained. "But she still shops, still watches TV every night." "That's common," the doctor nodded. "Familiar routines can be preserved longer, but higher-level functions, like managing money, analyzing information, signing documents, those are the first to decline." I clenched my hands. If she signed legal papers during that time, then can those be invalidated? "Possibly," she replied. "But you'll need an independent legal review based on this medical diagnosis. If you can prove she lacked capacity at the time of signing, you have grounds to challenge." I took the diagnostic summary she handed me. The paper was still warm from the printer. My mother's name sat at the top, just below the line that read, "Cognitive impairment early onset suspected." Leaving the clinic, Mom held my arm with that familiar smile of hers. "Can we go get lunch? I'm starving." I nodded, voice low. "Of course. What would you like?" "Apple pie from Marlowe's. Your father used to take me there when he was still alive." We drove to the little red-roofed diner tucked behind an office park. Mom ordered like everything was normal. But when the server brought the food, she stared at the plate without touching it. "I thought I asked for a savory pie. Charles, am I getting mixed up again?" I held her hand tightly. "No, Mom. You just need a little more rest." She teared up. "Amanda kept saying I was forgetting things and had me sign more papers so you wouldn't have to worry. I thought she meant well, but now I don't know who to trust." I didn't answer. I couldn't. That evening, I sat in the garage, opened my laptop, and emailed the full medical report from Dr. Moreau to Kyle. Minutes later, he called me back. Charles said, "This is exactly what we needed. With this document, I can file for an emergency order to temporarily freeze all transactions involving your mother over the past 12 months. And if we can prove manipulation, we can push to restore the trust." I exhaled. "Where do we start?" "We need a legal evaluation right away and, if possible, approach Amanda, casually. Ask why she had your mom sign those documents. If she slips, it'll make our job a lot easier. I closed the laptop, eyes drifting upstairs to where Amanda's office light was still on. I never thought I'd be preparing to go to war with the woman who once swore to protect this family as her own. But maybe it was that overconfidence of hers that let the cracks show. And now I had something she never saw coming: medical proof. The quiet war was about to begin. But this time, I wouldn't turn away. That Wednesday morning, I drove straight to the Lancaster County Notary office with a copy of the trust amendment and Dr. Moreau's diagnosis. Part of me still hoped this was all a misunderstanding, that Amanda had done everything simply to ease my burden. But another part, the part trained by 15 years in the military, screamed that I was staring at something deliberately buried. At the reception desk sat an older woman with a name tag that read Margaret. I explained I needed to verify the notary listed on the document. Deborah Langston. Margaret nodded, opened the registry, and handed me a scanned copy from that date. Mrs. Langston notarized 5 documents that day, she said. One of them was an amendment to a trust. The signer was listed as Mrs. Lorraine Hull. Is there a photo or any form of visual confirmation? I asked, keeping my tone steady. Margaret shook her head. No photo. But here's the signature from the signer and from the notary. She handed me the original scan. My mother's signature under the grantor line. It was a frail, shaky line, barely legible. There was no confirmation she'd been physically present when it was signed. Can you verify whether Ms. Langston actually witnessed my mother sign that document? I asked, voice low but firm. Margaret studied me for a moment. I'm afraid you'll need to ask her directly. But there's something you should know. Deborah no longer works here. She moved to a private law firm called Graves & Adler back in March. I blinked. Graves & Adler? The name sounded familiar. Then I remembered. Back when we were dating, Amanda once told me about a college friend named Cheryl Graves, the only daughter of a wealthy family in Kansas, now a senior partner at a prestigious law firm in Lincoln. I said nothing more to Margaret, just thanked her and left immediately. Minutes later, I stood in front of the glass building of Graves & Adler, my heart pounding. I walked up to the reception desk and asked to see Miss Langston, saying it was regarding an old notary file. The receptionist made a quick internal call, then motioned for me to wait. 7 minutes later, a woman with brown hair tied in a tight bun walked out. Her nameplate read D. Langston, Notary Public. There was a flicker of suspicion in her eyes as I stood to greet her. I'm Charles Hull, I said, locking eyes with her. Husband of Amanda Rayner Hull? Her face tightened. I'm afraid we don't have an appointment. I have just one question, I interrupted. The day you notarized the trust amendment for my mother, Lorraine Hull, was she physically here? Deborah gripped her folder a little tighter. I don't clearly remember. Did you personally witness my mother signing the document? I stepped closer, voice dropping. Or did you just stamp what Amanda brought you? She inhaled sharply and avoided my gaze. I can't answer that without legal counsel present. All my notarizations were based on lawful declarations from authorized representatives. Baby's declaration, I said, slowly. Deborah clenched the strap of her bag. I can't discuss this further. If you have concerns, you'll need to submit a written request through the legal office. I stood silently as she walked away, her posture stiff like someone who'd just stepped on a landmine. I knew I'd hit a nerve. That evening, I didn't go straight home. Instead, I stopped by a quiet bar near Holmes Lake, one few people visited. I called Kyle. I need you to file a complaint with the Nebraska Notary Board immediately, I said bluntly. Deborah Langston notarized a document without the signer present. I'm sure of it. She's the link between Amanda and her old college friend's law firm. Kyle wasn't surprised. Do you have the original address where the notarization took place? Building 316, 4th floor, Graves & Adler. Amanda went to college with Cheryl Graves, one of the partners. It's all starting to smell now. Got it. I'll draft the complaint and file it first thing tomorrow. Meanwhile, don't tip your hand. The less Amanda knows about what you're doing, the better. I nodded, knowing Kyle couldn't see me. I'll keep my mouth shut. But believe me, if Deborah Langston gets investigated, Amanda won't sleep another peaceful night. I ended the call and sat in the dark. Outside, the city glowed with streetlights and wind. Inside me, something else stirred. Not anger, but a cold clarity. I'd survived real battlefields, but no mission had ever required this level of precision. 3 days after the encounter with Deborah Langston, I got an unexpected call from an unknown number. A firm, composed female voice came through. Charles Hull, this is Vanessa McAllister, attorney and former classmate of Amanda. I think we need to talk. Her name stopped me cold. Vanessa Brzlaskio, once Amanda's closest friend in college, now a mid-level partner at a financial law firm in Omaha, she hadn't been on my radar. Until now. We met at a discreet cafe in Lincoln. Vanessa showed up in a navy blue suit, eyes tired but sharp, clearly someone who'd lived in the trenches of litigation. I know Deborah's under investigation, she said as soon as we sat. She told me everything, and I need to clarify a few things before this spirals further. I nodded silently. Sometimes silence is the most powerful question. About a year ago, Vanessa continued, Amanda asked me about moving assets overseas. She claimed it was for a client's portfolio, but now I'm not so sure. I didn't think much of it back then. What really bothered me was another conversation. One from 3 years ago. She hesitated, then spoke slowly, as if weighing every word. Amanda asked me how divorce works when the spouse is in the military, specifically how deployments affect asset division and pension eligibility. She was very detailed about the numbers, about federal regulations. I assumed it was professional curiosity. I stared at Vanessa, blood freezing in my veins. 3 years ago was when my rotations began ramping up. She's been planning this since then? Vanessa nodded slightly. I don't know if she acted on it back then, but she was already thinking of an exit, and maybe. The family property was just part of a much bigger play. I left the cafe feeling numb. A woman could ask about divorce and asset relocation, then turn around and whisper I miss you every day over a satellite phone. That night, I called Kyle and asked him to connect me with someone he trusted completely, a private investigator. The next morning, I met Lucas Trenton, a former FBI agent with a solid build and no-nonsense attitude. It took him only 2 days to start producing results. Amanda has a separate apartment in South Omaha, Lucas reported, showing me clear photos of a 3-story building where she rented under her maiden name, Amanda Rayner. The lease was signed 6 months ago. She's there at least twice a week, usually in the afternoons, while you're working or taking your mom to appointments. I kept my expression neutral. Anyone else visiting? Lucas shook his head. No overnight guests yet, but in the past 3 weeks she met with 2 men, a real estate investor and an architect. They reviewed floor plans together. Next, he opened his laptop and showed me screenshots pulled from Amanda's recovered hard drive, files that had been deleted but retrieved using his methods. Credit card bills, personal expense logs, and this? Proof she used over $42,000 from your mother's account to pay off her personal debt over the past 6 months. I took the printout he handed me, eyes fixed on the final line. Payment, Amex Platinum, paid via Lorraine Hold joint account. Every number sliced slowly across my palms like a blade. She also transferred $5,000 to an investment fund in the Bahamas. It was labeled relocation buffer. Hard not to connect that with an escape plan. I leaned back, mind reeling. Amanda hadn't just plotted to hijack the trust. She was paving the road to vanish entirely. Money and identity, both. Lucas tapped the table gently. Charles, my advice, don't confront her yet. Let her believe you're still in the dark. I nodded slowly. I won't say anything, but I will act when the time comes. That evening, Amanda came home late, carrying the scent of a new perfume and a shiny leather handbag I'd never seen before. It was a gift, she said when she caught me looking, from a client at work. They know I love Italian things. I smiled and stood up to pour her a glass of wine. Work must be going well? She grinned, unaware that I had already seen the architectural renderings on her laptop, and that every brick of her future dream home was being paid for with money taken from my mother's pocket. The game had changed. This time, I wasn't the one reacting. I arrived at Kyle's office at 7:00 a.m. the next morning, carrying everything Lucas had gathered: printed bills, photos of the hidden apartment, recovered hard drive files, and my mother's official medical diagnosis. Kyle greeted me with a serious nod and 2 cups of black coffee. "We can't wait any longer," I said, laying the documents on his desk. "Amanda's getting ready to disappear. If we don't stop her now, there'll be nothing left to save." Kyle nodded and opened his laptop, fingers typing nonstop. "I'm filing an emergency petition with Lincoln County Court this morning. We'll request 3 things: temporary guardianship over Mrs. Lorraine, a freeze on all current accounts and trust assets, and an official court hearing date. Do I need to go to court with you?" "Not this morning," he replied. "I'll handle the filing, but you should be prepared. If the judge approves this, everything changes within 48 hours. 2 hours later, the petition was filed with the Office of Estates and Incapacitated Persons. Kyle printed 3 copies, each stamped in red with the words "Emergency Petition, Immediate Relief, Discretion." In it, he outlined, "Mrs. Lorraine Hull is experiencing cognitive decline and requires legal protection. Financial actions over the past 12 months executed by Amanda Hull show signs of manipulation and financial abuse. Immediate freeze requested on all accounts and properties under Amanda Hull's control, including joint accounts, brokerage holdings, trust assets, and real estate. Petition for the court to bar her from accessing any financial sources until the investigation concludes." The filing was entered into the court's internal system. 10 minutes later, Kyle received an email from the court's coordination office. Judge Lisa Chambers had accepted the case and scheduled a preliminary hearing for the following Tuesday morning. I clenched my fist. It was Thursday. "We have less than 5 days to finalize all evidence," Kyle said, tension in his voice. "I'll work with the signature analysis unit and prepare asset protection motions. You stay completely calm. Don't let Amanda suspect a thing." I nodded firmly. "I'll play the clueless husband to the very end." That night, Amanda invited me to dinner to celebrate a new investment opportunity. She wore a deep blue velvet dress, the faint scent of Dior trailing her every step. "You should be proud," she said brightly as the waiter poured wine. "We're about to start a new chapter. I've spoken with our investment advisor about consolidating assets. If everything works out, we can sell the old property and expand our portfolio." "What about my mom?" I asked, keeping my tone casual. "Where would she go if the land sold?" Amanda shrugged, indifferent. "There are plenty of new care facilities opening up. The important thing is that she'll be taken care of, and we get to live the life we deserve." I gave a half smile. "Sounds like you've planned this thoroughly." "It's called vision, Charles." She clinked her glass with mine. "Not like you, always letting emotion get in the way." I didn't respond. What burned inside me wasn't rage anymore, it was cold determination. Every word she said now was evidence. I didn't have to force anything. The next morning, Kyle called. "We got the asset protection order. Judge Chambers signed it at 9:03 a.m. From this moment on, Amanda can't access any account or asset under your mother's name. I've also coordinated with the banks to freeze all login access." I held my breath. "What about the hearing?" "Still scheduled as planned, but now we have a huge advantage. If Amanda reacts strongly, that'll be proof of motive." I leaned back in my chair, staring at the ceiling like I'd just walked away from an explosion. That afternoon, I called Lucas. "Now's the time. Gather everything. Emails, messages, credit card activity. As much as you can." "Understood," Lucas said. "And I just got word. Amanda contacted a different law firm in Kansas City. Looks like she's starting to feel it." I looked out the window, watching the sunset stretch across the lawn. A cold breeze slipped through the window frame. This battle wasn't just legal anymore. It had moved into real space, and I wasn't losing anything else. Not one more inch of land, not one more drop of blood from my family. At 8:00 a.m. Tuesday, I stepped out of my car in a tailored gray suit, heart pounding like a storm. The Lancaster County Courthouse stood tall ahead, its bronze dome catching the pale winter light. Across the street, Amanda climbed out of a sleek black SUV. She wore a cropped fur coat, her face calm and unreadable. Two young attorneys from a Kansas City firm walked beside her. She didn't look at me. Kyle appeared beside me, placing a steady hand on my shoulder. "We've got everything, don't worry." I nodded, then followed him inside. My mother, brought by Aunt Lydia, sat quietly in her wheelchair at the front row. Her face looked tired, but her eyes still held a flicker of clarity, something I prayed the judge would see. The hearing began promptly at 9 o'clock. Judge Lisa Chambers, a stern woman with piercing eyes, entered and nodded at both sides. This hearing is to determine the validity of recent amendments to the Whole Family Trust and to evaluate conduct related to guardianship and asset management of Mrs. Lorraine Whole, she declared. Kyle was first to speak. He stood confidently, his voice steady and clear. "Your Honor, my client, Mr. Charles Whole, states that his mother, Mrs. Lorraine Whole, was coerced into signing legal documents while lacking full mental capacity. We present medical, financial, and legal evidence to support this claim." The first witness was Dr. Angela Moreau. She confirmed, in a gentle but firm tone, "Based on standardized cognitive testing, I conclude that Mrs. Lorraine Whole is exhibiting signs of early-stage dementia, with symptoms clearly traceable to approximately 15 months ago. Signing complex documents such as trust amendments during that time would not have been appropriate." Next was Mr. David Sloan, the forensic accountant Kyle had hired. He displayed a series of irregular financial transactions, pulled from 3 accounts associated with my mother. In just 6 months, over $72,000 were transferred to accounts directly tied to Miss Amanda Whole, including credit card payments, real estate deposits, and international wire transfers. The entire courtroom fell silent. Then came Vanessa. She stepped up to the witness stand, her eyes flicking briefly toward Amanda. Her voice was calm but sharp. "I confirm that Notary Deborah Langston did not personally witness Mrs. Lorraine Whole sign the trust amendment. She affixed her seal based on Amanda Whole's verbal assurance that Mrs. Whole had signed it while fully lucid." "And do you believe that was legal?" Kyle asked. "No," Vanessa replied. "It was a serious violation of notary protocol." Amanda began to shift in her seat. She shook her head slightly and whispered with her attorney. Lucas was next. He presented photographic evidence and surveillance logs. Amanda Whole leased a separate apartment 6 months ago under her maiden name. She regularly met with real estate developers there and made luxury purchases using joint accounts with Mrs. Lorraine Whole. A $5,000 deposit for an assisted living facility was documented, but the facility confirmed they only received $2,000. The remaining amount is unaccounted for. Kyle slowly walked to the stand holding a USB drive. "Your Honor, we also have an audio recording between Ms. Amanda Whole and a real estate developer named Glenn Kerrigan. With the court's permission, I'd like to play it now." The audio echoed through the courtroom. "Once she's moved out, I want to split the land into 3 lots, 2 for sale, 1 for a rental complex. We can sign by June." "And my mother-in-law?" Amanda's voice came through, clearly. "As long as you've got the legal paperwork." "Don't worry, I already took care of that. Now we just need Charles to walk away from the estate." I looked over at Amanda. She stared down, saying nothing. Her attorney stood and attempted to respond. "My client has been a full-time caregiver and has acted solely in Mrs. Whole's best interest." "Best interest by selling her land when she never wanted to leave?" Kyle shot back. "Or by using her money to pay off personal credit card debt, buy designer handbags, and rent a secret apartment?" No one said a word. Judge Chambers tapped her gavel lightly. "This court will review the evidence and issue a ruling within 3 days. Until then, all assets will remain frozen. Amanda Whole is barred from accessing any financial accounts or real estate associated with Mrs. Lorraine Whole." Amanda didn't lift her head. I kept my eyes forward. The battle wasn't over, but for the first time, the scales of justice leaned toward truth. 3 days after the hearing, I returned to the Lancaster courthouse wearing my father's old suit, the one I'd kept in a cedar chest in the attic, reserved only for the most important occasions. Today, I wasn't just standing for my mother. I was standing for the man who had always believed that justice, even if delayed, must still come. Amanda arrived 5 minutes late. She walked into the courtroom stiffly, flanked by her 2 attorneys, her face pale. She didn't look at me. I had nothing left to look back at. Judge Lisa Chambers entered promptly at 9 o'clock AY. She sat, placed a thick file on her bench, scanned both sides of the room, then tapped her gavel gently. After reviewing all submitted evidence, witness testimony, and legal documents, this court delivers the following ruling. The courtroom went completely silent, save for the sound of pages turning and the ticking of the second hand on the clock. First, the judge began, evidence from the geriatric specialist, the forensic accountant, and the testimony of an independent witness has persuaded the court that Mrs. Lorraine Hull was not legally competent at the time of signing the trust amendment. She paused for a moment, glancing toward Amanda. Second, the notarization of the document by Ms. Deborah Langston failed to follow proper procedure, as the signer was not present. This renders the document legally invalid. I felt my heart pound once. Kyle squeezed my hand beneath the table as if to say, "We're winning." Third, the judge continued, the court declares the trust amendment dated April 14 of last year null and void. The whole family trust will be restored to its original form as drafted by Mr. Harold Hull, with Mrs. Lorraine Hull as the primary beneficiary and Mr. Charles Hull as the sole co-trustee. Amanda slumped slightly as if she might faint. One of her attorneys caught her by the shoulder and whispered something to her. Fourth, the judge went on, all funds withdrawn from any accounts associated with Mrs. Lorraine Hull over the past 12 months shall be returned in full. Any property or goods purchased with those funds will be appraised and liquidated if necessary to repay the losses. A clerk passed a document to the judge's assistant for stamping. I heard the gavel again. This ruling takes immediate effect. I thought it was over, but Judge Chambers wasn't finished. And finally, she said, her tone slower, based on compelling evidence of financial manipulation, exploitation of an elder with cognitive decline, and fraudulent conduct in asset and notarial matters, I hereby refer the full case record to the Lancaster County District Attorney's Office for review of potential criminal charges against Miss Amanda Hull. I heard Amanda gasp. Her attorney began to rise to object, but the judge raised her hand to stop him. No further arguments. My ruling is final in this proceeding. This hearing is adjourned. She struck the gavel once more. The room froze. People rose quietly. Amanda remained seated, her face drained, eyes vacant. I didn't walk over. There was nothing left to say. Kyle turned to me. We did it, but now comes the real work, restoring what's rightfully your mother's. I nodded, then walked to my mother's side. She reached for my hand with her frail fingers, but her grip was surprisingly strong. Your father would be proud, she whispered. I couldn't speak. I just bowed my head, tears falling silently onto her hand. In the 2 weeks that followed, Kyle worked with the prosecutor's office to finalize the criminal case. Amanda's passport was confiscated, and she was ordered to appear in court again to face charges of elder financial abuse and fraud. I didn't attend that hearing. I had no need to see her again. I used the recovered funds to renovate my mother's cottage, the one behind the main house where my father had once built furniture. I moved her there permanently, hiring a full-time caregiver who was kind, patient, and most importantly, honest. One spring afternoon, I sat on the back porch steps, tea in hand, gazing out at the endless field of tall grass where my father once taught me archery. A gentle breeze swept through, and the old oak tree still stood, its roots deep, its presence unshaken. No more Amanda, no more lies, only peace, and a piece of land that, finally, had been returned to the right hands. 3 weeks after the final ruling, I moved my mother from the main house to the cottage behind the property, my father's old woodworking shop. The small timber structure, with rough plank walls and windows facing the eastern garden, had been empty for nearly a decade. I spent a whole weekend scraping off the old paint, fixing the plumbing, and placing a new bed by the window so she could see the morning sun slide across the grass. I hired a nurse named Ella, a woman in her early 50s, who had worked at the local assisted living facility. Ella didn't talk much, but every time she brushed my mother's hair or helped her write down lines from her favorite TV shows, I saw my mom smile more often. Not the kind of smile people give when prompted, but the smile of someone who finally feels safe. The money to pay Ella, renovate the cottage, and cover my mother's medication all came from the funds recovered after the lawsuit. Amanda was forced to return every dollar she had misused from accounts under my mother's name. The court also ordered her to sell her full stake in the real estate firm she had secretly invested in. That amount was enough to take care of my mother for the rest of her life. I filed for divorce just 3 days after all legal paperwork was finalized. Amanda didn't contest it, didn't ask for any assets, didn't show up in court. Her attorney sent a single-line email. My client agrees to all terms. She will leave Nebraska. The apartment Amanda once rented in Omaha was left empty less than a week later. The landlord said she had paid off the remaining rent and dropped the keys in the mailbox. No note, no goodbye. I didn't ask where she went. I didn't need to know. In the quiet days after the storm, I reached out to Connor Bishop Minor, my cousin, son of my mom's childhood best friend. He had just passed the bar exam, young but sharp and honest. I asked him to co-sign as co-trustee to help manage the family trust under the court's revised structure. "You sure?" Connor asked when I handed him the agreement. "This trust is a legacy. I've barely started in this field. I'm not looking for experience," I told him. "I need someone who keeps their word and has no desire to erase the roots." Connor signed without hesitation. That night, we drank beer on the back porch like the last 2 men left in the whole bloodline, talking about how to protect the land from people who redraw boundaries with dollar signs. Summer came and went. The 14.5 acres stayed lush with grass and shaded by the same oak trees that had stood there for decades. I started planting a row of lavender near the western woods, where my mom often sat in the evenings to read poetry. One day she asked, "Charles, how long do you think this place will stay in the family?" I took her hand and said, "As long as I'm breathing." Life isn't noisy now. I wake up at 6, brew coffee, help Ella care for mom, then work remotely with old accounting clients. On weekends, Kyle drops by with scones and legal updates. And Lucas, the investigator who helped me uncover everything, occasionally sends postcards from the road. A gas station in Utah, a police station in New Mexico, a cafe in Wyoming. Under each picture he scribbles, "Keep the faith. Don't ever let it be bought again." One late afternoon, while reorganizing my father's old land maps in the garage, I found a handwritten note, laminated in plastic. It was one of his messages. The one who holds the land doesn't just hold dirt. He holds the past, the honor, and a promise made to those who are no longer here. I folded the note and placed it back in the wooden drawer. I no longer felt angry at Amanda. I didn't dwell on the betrayal. Those things belonged to a version of the past I had already left behind. Now I held on to the only thing that still felt right. A piece of land, a mother, and a life no longer rewritten by lies. The wind still moved through the oak trees, and I was still here, guarding my father's old promise, like no one had ever tried to erase it from the map. Charles's story is a powerful reminder that blind trust can become the gateway to tragedy. In a world where greed often wears the mask of family, protecting elderly parents is not just a moral duty, it's a legal one. Through vigilance and resolve, Charles didn't just save his mother from abuse, he preserved the legacy of a family. This story reflects a real and growing threat. Elder financial abuse is becoming more sophisticated, and silence is its greatest accomplice. What are your thoughts on Charles's journey and the choices he made? Share your opinion below. Don't forget to follow this channel for more true, thought-provoking stories about family, trust, and life lessons that matter.